Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, faculty members, and dear students, a very warm welcome and heartfelt welcome to each and every one of you present today. It is indeed a moment of great honor and privilege to gather here at Tyagaraja School of Management for this special occasion. To commence our event, let us extend a warm welcome to our esteemed chief guest and all the distinguished dignitaries today. Now, to formally begin our program, I now invite Dr. N. Manjula, Associate Professor and Admissions Chairperson, to deliver the welcome note.
So good evening, everyone. So it's my absolute honor and privilege to welcome you all to the special gathering at Tyagaraja School of Management today. So while International Women's Day may have passed, the spirit of celebrating women's achievements and fostering empowerment continues beyond a single day. So today we come together to acknowledge the remarkable contributions of women who shape our world with their leadership, resilience, and determination. So this year's theme for all women and girls, rights, equality, and empowerment, underscores the progress as we track made and the work that still lies ahead in fostering the inclusivity and creating equal opportunities for women in the ever parts of life. So I'm particularly delighted to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed chief guest of the day, Ms. Uma Ratnam Krishnan, Managing Director of Optum. Ms. Krishnan is a visionary leader who has shaken barriers and who has shaken the barriers and inspired countless individuals with her remarkable contributions to finance and healthcare technology. So her leadership journey is a beacon of motivation, especially for women, inspiring to break new grounds in leadership and innovation. So we are truly honored to have you here, ma'am, amidst us today. So beyond contributing to women achievements, today marks an important milestone on the, introducing a new initiative of TSM, the soft launch of the Growth Mastery Program for the MSMEs in particular. So we at TSM have always believed in the power of education, mentorship, and leadership to create an environment where individuals, business, women, and communities thereafter have to thrive. This gathering is a testament to our continued commitment to learning, collaboration, and empowerment. With that, I once again extend a warm welcome to all the guests of the day and especially our chief guest, Ms. Uma Ratnam. Thank you once again. Looking forward for an inspiring and insightful session ahead. Welcome you all once again.
Thank you, Dr. Manjula, for setting the tone for this wonderful gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to introduce our distinguished leader whose remarkable journey has left an indelible mark in the world of finance and leadership, Ms. Uma Ratnam Krishnan. Before we move into an exclusive interaction with her, let us take a moment to learn more about her inspiring journey through this short video.
Some leaders inspire, some leaders transform, and some redefine the very meaning of success. Today, we honor one such visionary, Ms. Uma Ratnam Krishnan. With over 27 years of excellence in the financial services sector, Ms. Krishnan has shaped businesses, empowered teams, and pioneered change across industries. Her journey of excellence began with an outstanding academic foundation. She pursued business studies at IIM Bangalore, Harvard, and Wharton, equipping herself with the knowledge and expertise to navigate the dynamic world of finance and leadership. From securing a top rank in the Indian Foreign Service to leading Backlist, NatWest, HDFC Bank, Polaris Software Lab Limited, and ANZ Grindlace Bank, her career is a testament to resilience, vision, and innovation. As the Managing Director of Optum India, she continues to drive business strategy, healthcare technology, and entrepreneurship, inspiring the next generation of leaders. Today, we are privileged to welcome Ms. Uma Ratnam Krishnan to the Tyagaraja School of Management for an exclusive session on women in business, redefining leadership and success. Ms. Uma Ratnam Krishnan, thank you for leading the way, for breaking barriers, and for empowering countless professionals to dream big. We are honored to have you with us today.
The heart of today's event is an insightful panel discussion, which will be facilitated by the esteemed Dr. Manju Jayakumar. It is an honor to introduce Dr. Manju Jayakumar, an accomplished academician and researcher with a PhD in management from IIT Kharagpur. She has made significant contributions to banking, investment, and venture capital research with publications in Scopus indexed and ABDC ranked journals. With expertise in data analysis and financial modeling, she has also conducted training programs for Reserve Bank of India and IIT Kharagpur. Join me in welcoming Ms. Uma Ratnam, our esteemed chief guest of the day, and Dr. Manju Jayakumar on stage. Janani from Swati Creations and Nikhila, student at TSM, young entrepreneur, to present a special gift they have crafted for the guest.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let us now start with the most awaited panel discussion. Ma'am, over to you.
Privileged to be here today as we dive into a session that is not just about leadership but about redefining success, breaking barriers, and creating impact, especially for women in business. And what better way to do than by learning from someone who has walked through the path, shattered ceilings, and built a legacy of leadership across multiple industries. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have with us today Ms. Uma Ratnam Krishnan, a remarkable leader whose journey spans across civil services, global banking, and now healthcare technology. From securing a top rank in Indian civil services to leading major financial institutions like Barclays, NatWest, and HDFC Bank, and now spearheading Optum India. Ms. Uma has worn many hats, each with excellence, resilience, and innovation. But beyond her impressive credential, what makes her truly inspiring in her passion for mentoring, empowering women leaders, and driving challenge in this business world. Ms. Uma, we are so excited to hear from you. So to begin with, let us take a step back to where it all started. You have a unique career path, started from Indian civil services to corporate world. That's not a shift many people like to make. Can you take us through what inspired the journey and what it was like making that transition? And I know you address this question in every talk, but for this audience, I would like to ask this.
Thank you, Dr. Manju. First, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. I'm privileged and honored to be today here and sharing some of my learnings and a little bit of my journey with you. You're a group of amazing young women and entrepreneurs with a lot in front of you, and hopefully each of you making a difference in everything you touch. So going back to Dr. Manju's question, right? I smiled because it's over 35 years since I left the civil services, but I still get asked this question every time I meet somebody and I say I was in the civil service. And they say, why on earth did you leave the foreign service to join a bank? Right? So here's the thing. If I actually look back, why did I actually join the civil service, right? I joined the civil services because my generation was at the start of the dawn of a new India. We were just getting into, a liberalized economy, and I did economics, when I went to college, and my objective was simply, I wanted to make a difference to the economic development story of this country. And that was what motivated me to do the civil services. Now, I did it got through it, did not think I would get through it. It was the first time I wrote it, right? People write it more than once. And therefore, like any rookie who's gone to college for the first time, I did not know that I wanted the IAS. So simply put, I put foreign service instead of IAS first. And because I did so well, they gave me the foreign service, which was fine. I had no problem with it. But I actually went to them and nicely said, you know what, I want this IAS. So they smiled nicely at me and said, sorry, that date is over. You should have come for 2 months before or something. Anyway, so I joined, I worked for 2 years. And at the end of, and it's been one of the most amazing stints of my life. I shared with the earlier group, I can see Ankita, right? Here. And I shared with them that my journey with the civil services for my first 8 months, it was an amazing learning journey, my first ever job. And the kind of relationships I made stand me till today. They are my friends, they are my circle of support, and they do some great jobs in the government, right? But having spent 2 years there, I said, okay, but this is in the foreign service. Remember, foreign service, you're India's ambassadors to the world, whatever you do. My first posting was in Paris. And I said, no, but this is not why I wanted to join the civil service. I wanted to join the civil service for driving India's economic development. Anyway, 2 years later, and after the government decided, no, they're definitely not going to allow me to switch. Eventually, they did ask me to, but I decided not to take it because I had already by then taken leave and gone to IIM. Now, I finished my MBA and I could have easily gone back to the services, simply put. But the banks gave me a job. Two banks and one consumer products company gave me a job. And when you're 24 years old, you really don't know much, right? So you say, oh, okay. This job looks like a good thing. Why should I go back and then lose my 2 years of seniority in the civil service? And I took on the job of one of the jobs that was offered to me with the ANZ Grindlays Bank. And I don't regret that at all. I always say there are no regrets, there are only learnings, right? The learnings from my foreign service and my civil service days and my learnings from my banking career, and now, of course, something different. Because, so I left because I thought that was the good thing to do at that time. But like I said, no regrets. Very recently, I met some of my batchmates, and I met somebody who was an extremely senior bureaucrat who retired years ago. And I told him this story, and he was really, he said, you know what? The government's loss is somebody else's gain. I said, thank you, sir. That's exactly how I feel about it. So, but I should count myself lucky because I had the opportunity to do a bit of both.
Thank you, ma'am. I think many of us in the audience can relate to this, whether it is about switching industries, taking risk and stepping out of their comfort zone. It is reassuring to hear from you. Someone who has done it so successfully and saying there is no regrets. Speaking of bold career moves, let us talk about your journey. Some of the world's biggest financial institutions, Barclays, NatWest, HDFC, these organizations operates on global scale with unique challenges. How did you navigate these leadership roles across different companies and cultures?
Yeah, so couple of things. When my first job, which was ANZ Grindlays, I spent 12 years there. I think of it as my learning lab. Whatever I learnt about banking, I learnt about 70-80% with my 12 years with Grindlays. And it was an extraordinarily supportive environment and a very learning environment and an environment which gave you different opportunities. Within my 12 years, I must have done 5 or 6 roles, right? It's very different roles. So I really learned a lot. The first time you switch a job after 12 years, I can tell you it wasn't easy. I kind of said, oops, am I going to fail here, right? Because you get into a almost comfort zone. And then when I got kicked out of that comfort zone, and believe me, it was a decision I made. Nobody forced me to make that decision. I made that decision to leave and go somewhere else. The way I looked at it was, this is my learning opportunity. And that has been one of the things that has been my sort of personal mantra, which is, in anything you do, have a learning mindset, have what is called a growth mindset. Right? Which is, growth mindset simply means I can learn and grow. So the first time I went into a different organization, it was a shock, because it was different, the people were different, ways of operating were different, cultures were different. I just could not say, oh, all right, I have to learn to swim or I will quickly sink, right? The good news was that when I moved into this organization, I had people who were working, who had earlier worked with me. So number one, how do you navigate this? Always find somebody who can be your buddy, all right, who can help you navigate. Because in any new organization or business, it's about understanding how things are done around here, right? And that's not easy. The culture of each organization is very different. Sometimes I feel, and my last job shift, right, from 30 or plus years in banking to healthcare. How many people have asked me, really? What are you doing in healthcare? You're a banker. Yes. But why did I decide to come into healthcare? Somebody 2 months ago told me, they heard I did one interview on CNBC, which you would have seen. Somebody later came and told me, I would have never guessed you haven't worked in healthcare for a long time, right? Because again, going back, what was the first thing I did? When I get into a new organization, a new business, I don't share my views like I know everything. My first job is to listen. And I do that. I speak to as many people as I can. I listen and I learn about the company. This company I work for is a very large and complex company. It took me 6 months to even understand and join all the dots, right? So one of the things about leadership particularly is to listen more than you talk, to start with, and even going forward, hopefully talk less and listen more, right? The third thing I'll say is cultures. The one other part I'll touch on is, I worked with 2 British banks, 1 Australian bank, and now 1 American company. Cultures are very, very different, right? What you say, what you can do, how meetings are held, how you influence people, how what you say lands with somebody, right? You think you're trying to say something, but they understand something completely different, even with the same English language, with the same words. So it's about understanding the culture of how you communicate in these organizations. And lastly, early days, make sure that you have some quick wins. What do I mean by that? When you shift, right? Make sure you have some quick wins, which is the minute you get in 60, 90, 120 days, pick something which you can actually deliver where people can notice that you've made a difference here, right? Then it becomes easy for you rather than try and chew a huge elephant at the same time. Don't take on something that's so big that you're destined to fail. Pick something which has impact, but it's quite small, but it has made a difference. And then take it from there. What does that mean? You've got some points on runs on the board, right? For cricket, you've got your opening, you've got your first 50. Then you can move on to do your centuries and do whatever else that you need to do. And the last one is moving from one area to another. So even in my banking jobs, though I've spent longest in banking, my jobs were very, very different, right? It's only when you do that you get the width. A lot of people ask me, so how do you become a CEO or an MD of a company, right? One of the very important requirements is to understand multiple parts of the business. If you do just one bit of it, it's not quite enough. So don't be scared to do some lateral movements if you need to. So one of my forays into Polaris briefly, well, it was caused due to some circumstances. I'm very happy I did that because that was my stint in a technology company, which actually today is the reason why I can understand technology. And in today's world, if you don't understand technology, it doesn't matter where you work, right? And not that I know everything, but I at least understand technology. So I think there are a few things that have worked for me as I've navigated through different companies, different cultures, different assignments. But I would fundamentally say a growth and learning mindset.
That's an incredible perspective. For those in audience who are working towards leadership roles, this is a great reminder that being open to different experience, industries, and even geographical shift can be a game changer in the career. Once I heard you mention in an interview that you grow up in an unbiased environment. That being said, now banking and financial services have traditionally been considered male-dominated industries, and leadership position even more so. So, as a women leader who has risen up to the top in this space, did you face any gender bias or challenges along the way? And more importantly, how did you overcome this? Can you recall any incidents?
Yeah, I'll share a couple of stories. So uh, I think I started with a little bit of an advantage. And what do I mean by that? And I don't mean when I started my career. I mean when I was very young. I grew up as an only child. Did not have a brother, thank God. But those of you who might have brothers, I have a son, by the way, and a daughter, so I'm not biased. And I love both of them. But when I grew up as a single child. Now, what does that mean? I grew up in a household which was, my father was, my mother was a double graduate, she was a master's. My father was a lawyer, second, third generation almost. And I actually grew up for a long time without knowing the difference between what a girl could do and what a boy could do, right? There was nobody to tell me, you can do this and you can't do this, right? Which in my mind was a huge advantage because it allowed me the space to dream however I wanted to, right? And of course, I started saying, I want to be an astronaut, I want to do something else, all that happened. But there was no point at which there was a barrier to say you cannot do something. So it was up to me to decide what that barrier or that boundary was, right? So while I grew up in that environment, also, she talked about banking being male dominated. The early days, I think two professions in the corporate side or in a career sense, which slowly started opening up to women. One was the government, right, which actually had a few women. Of course, there were more traditional professions like teaching and nursing and all of that. I'm not talking about those. And the second, interestingly, was actually banking. If you look at a lot of the public sector banks and then also the multinational banks, when we started, we were slowly starting to see women come into the workplace, into these sectors even more. Did I face gender bias? Over a period of time, over my many years, yes, in various situations. But I think the one most important one which I faced myself, I wouldn't even call it, I think when I say I faced myself, one of my very first jobs, right? I have one of my ex-colleagues sitting here, so he will recognize this. I was a branch manager in a branch in Chennai for the bank I worked in. I had actually taken over this job from somebody who retired before me, right? So you can imagine the difference. I was 24 or 25 or something like that, and he had just retired from the bank. And then I show up in this bank, first day. I had at least 3 customers come and tell me, you are the manager? Are you sure? Do you know what you're doing? Right? So first, I was a woman. Secondly, I looked like nothing like the previous manager, right? So I then went back home and I said, okay, what do I do? I have to build trust with this community. And they were all sort of, middle class, well-to-do, some retired, some not retired, but like a residential locality. So I kind of went back and I said, okay, how do I deal with this, right? This is on the customer side, and then I'll talk a little bit about the company as well in a couple of areas. So I came back and I said, okay, from tomorrow, my job is to make sure I look 5 years older than I am. Okay. Now, easier said than done. What did I do? I decided to start wearing a sari every day. Okay, that helped. And even today, when somebody says, "How are you so comfortable in sari?" I said, "I'll tell you the story of when all of this started." Right? So, absolutely, you face gender bias, right? But I think it happens in obvious ways like this, and sometimes it happens in very subtle ways. Now, very subtle ways is interesting, and this was not in my first company, in a different company. Around the very senior leadership table, I was the only woman, right? I mean, when you're the only woman in the room, your voice is a little not loud, let me put it that way. Secondly, you say something which is your idea, which sometimes people don't listen to, and then some other guy repeats it, and they say, "Oh, what a wonderful idea." Right? How many of you have seen this? Yeah, I have lots of hands in the room. So this has happened to me several times. Right? Now, in the beginning, I used to think, okay, it's this person, it's that person. Finally, I said, okay, if this is, I'm not going to stand up for this, nobody else will, right? So there came a point where I said, when somebody said, I said, "Hey, don't you recall I talked about this exactly 1.5 minutes ago?" So it's important for us to call it out, but in a very nice way, right? Many of us are guilty of not calling it out because we feel that's how it is. And that's how we've been used to, so what's the point? You can call it out in a very, very simple way. So yes, absolutely, have faced bias. The third part is sometimes the bias happens because people don't know they're biased. This is kind of what we call unconscious bias. I'll give you an example. I've heard many people say, "Oh, we can't hire this woman because she's going to get married, next year she's going to get pregnant, then off she's gone, I don't have anybody, I can't replace her." You've heard this story, right? Yeah. So why is that such an unconscious bias? Somebody like me took maternity leave for 3 months and came right back to work. Not everybody will, but you can. But you cannot assume, right, that everybody will react in the same way. And, just because, and they might not even get married, they might not even have children, but just because somebody is 25, you can't just decide, "Oh, in 2 years they will be married, they will have kids, so the next 4 years is gone." And unconscious bias is unfortunately a cultural outcome, and we just have to keep working at it. Now, many organizations are spending a lot of time and effort in addressing unconscious bias, because people who have unconscious biases, by the virtue of the name, they're unconscious. They don't know that they have it, right? The same thing, boy can do this, girl can't do this, right? It's also an unconscious bias. So that's the other thing which we're working a lot towards. So we'll
Thank you
continue.
for sharing that, and I remind my PhD day interview. I have got the same question from one of my panel interviewer. He asked, "You're young and maybe you will get married, so how will you do your PhD?" I did. I am here.
Exactly. Just because you're getting married doesn't mean you can't do a PhD, right? This is a bias, but yeah.
The next thing is about Optum India. What inspired you transition to Optum India, and how different has it been leading in the healthcare technology space compared to banking?
What inspired me to leave Barclays, where I had spent 7.5 years, and maybe I could have spent a little more, and then go to a completely unknown sector, as well as a company, which was Optum. Sometimes I think it's stupidity, but in hindsight, I don't think it was, right? I'm actually enjoying it. Why am I saying that? The reason I chose to do this was, people sometimes call and say, "Hey, there's this job, are you interested?" This, that, and the other. So there came a point when I surprised myself when somebody called me about something, and I said, "If it's one more bank, don't call me. I don't want to work for one more bank. I have worked for 5 banks. I'm done." Right? I want to do something different, which is true, right? And I had originally thought, once I'm done with Barclays, I'll do something else. Anyway, this came my way. I had not taken it seriously. One thing led to another, and suddenly I found myself in this job. Not unconsciously, but very consciously. Now, why did I choose to do this? One, because the challenge, what has always driven me or motivated me is the challenge to do something different, right? Or the challenge to take on something which looks difficult or looks like on the face of it not logical, right? Now, what is the downside to it? The chances of failure are quite high. Yeah. So it doesn't mean in all my jobs that I've done, I've liked everything, I've done fantastically in everything. No, there are at least 2 jobs that I know I'll never want to do again. Those kinds of jobs, right? Not companies' jobs, roles within the company. But unless you do it, you won't know that you don't like it, right? So one is my ability to say, I want to take on this and I want to take on a new challenge. So that was one. The second one was going back to my first point. I don't ever want to work in a bank, so healthcare looked like a good thing to learn something new. And why healthcare particularly? Because of the fact that I think post-COVID, healthcare became quite personal to all of us. I had never spent so much time on understanding and knowing anything about healthcare. But I think having led through COVID, a very large organization, a lot of people seeing the trauma that happened, how we could support them. Healthcare was quite personal. So I said, if there is something I can learn more about and do something and make a difference, healthcare is a good bet. And lastly, I have a motto which says, if you have to fail, fail fast. So, but I'm still here 2 years later in Optum, so clearly I haven't failed fast. If I had failed, I would have been out of there very quickly, right? So, but yeah, so those are the reasons I actually decided to do this.
That's so nice to hear from you. Another big game changer today is technology and digital innovation. An era where AI, automation, and data are transforming the way business operate. I would like to ask some question about technology. If you see, I have 3 questions, but I would make it shorter. So, and how any professional, especially women, leverage technology to drive success in their careers?
Look, whether you're a man or a woman, you've got to leverage technology to drive your career, right? It doesn't matter who it is. In fact, I had one of my Barclays global CEO said, we're just a technology business with a balance sheet. It's kind of gone that far. I mean, bank's balance sheet, yeah, we manage a balance sheet, but it's really fundamentally driven by technology, right? From my perspective, how I use technology is in 2-3 ways. One is, how can technology help solve a customer problem? That's the business context to it, right? You need to know, I'm not a technologist, as in I'm not a software engineer or whatever, but I know enough about technology and I have to keep up to date with technology to understand how technology can help deliver better outcomes for both my business and for the customer. That's one. The second, personally, it's a real job to keep track of what are the new technologies, what's being used. Currently, I am learning various AI engines, but it's not easy. Every day you have to keep track of what's going on. In today's world, if you're not up to date with the kinds of technology, somebody else will come and get it. Somebody else will come and eat your lunch, right? So any business that you're doing, please keep looking at what are the options to use technology to better customer outcomes, right? So it does not mean that you just have to make a bad process better using technology. My ask would be, reimagine the outcome for the customer, right? If a customer wants X, is there a better, smarter way of actually delivering it, and can technology help with that, right? And technology is all kinds. Today, the primary driver is digital. Most individuals and whatever, millennials, Gen Zs, everybody wants everything to be managed by themselves, which is in a digital way, right? For healthcare, for example, we're slowly seeing some movement towards saying customers want to manage their own healthcare journey digitally. What does that mean? You want to know which doctor to book. You want to book the appointment. You want to make sure that you know what's happening to your tests or you want to have that experience in the palm of your hand rather than looking at the doctor all the time and waiting for a appointment to go and get that information. So that whole digital transformation journey is moving very quickly from a consumer perspective. So if any of you are doing businesses which is touching the consumer, please see how you can give them a digital experience, a simple, easy one, which will make it easy for them.
Thank you. It is incredible to see the technology changing the future. To make this discussion more spicy, I would like to ask some rapid fire questions. to which you can answer in a short or a word possible. What is the first thing you do every morning?
First thing I do. A terrible admission to make, but I check my emails when I get up.
One word that describes your leadership style.
Inclusive.
A book every leader should read.
Growth Mindset, Carol Dweck is the author.
Tea or coffee?
Both. But not too many in a day, both.
A superpower you wish you had.
Being invisible in some places.
That's so nice. Everybody wish that. The biggest myth about women in leadership.
Biggest myth about women in leadership, that they can't take difficult decisions.
That's true. Your go-to stress buster.
Oh, that's easy. I go for a hike in the mountains. I don't get to do it every day, but when I do, that's my biggest stress buster.
That's so nice. Are you doing it?
Yes, I have so far done 20 hikes,
Oh my God.
about 12 in the Himalayas. So my last one was 4 months ago in the Himalayas. Went to a place called Dodital Lake.
Oh, it's inspiring. What is the best career advice you ever received?
The best career advice I ever received was own who you are. Be comfortable with who you are.
Okay.
You know, own your words, your actions, and your presence. One more piece of career advice: give it the best you can, whatever it is, right? And then what happens.
If not a corporate leader, what would you be doing today?
Most likely a lawyer, given the 3 generations in the house were lawyers, right? Or a judge, both my father and grandfather. So one of those.
What did you learn from your mother, grandmother, or any woman who inspired you, which helped you in your career?
Both my mother and grandmother are good examples. From my mother, I've learned the incredible ability to be curious, right? Even today, she's 84, but she will know about every Netflix, she will know about every article, she will know about politics. So just the ability to be curious. And from my grandmother, an extraordinary commercial ability. She had not studied beyond 3rd standard, but she managed several building projects, knew exactly how much she spends. So, and they were all fairly inspiring women given the times they operated in, the fact that they did not. My mother, of course, was a graduate, she was a master's. But yeah, and even today I get told sometimes, this is exactly like your grandmother. So, which is quite interesting. But yeah, they walked the path before us. They've been an inspiration. And thanks for what they did.
We had such an insightful conversation so far. But now it's time to hear from our audience. I open the floor to the audience for questions.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Pratyusha. I would like to know what exactly Optum does. Like, I did read about the company, the website, but I was not clear as to what kind of services they exactly provide.
Sure. So Optum is a part of United Health Group, which is a US company. It's the biggest healthcare company in the US. And it's got two sort of major businesses. United Healthcare is the insurance arm, and Optum is what I would call the healthcare delivery arm, right? Now, what do they do? So I'll tell you what we do in the US, what we do in India. Right? In the US, Optum has three core businesses. One is called Optum Health. Now, Optum Health is a collection of healthcare providers. What does that mean? Healthcare provider means a hospital or somebody who provides healthcare. It's a hospital, large hospital, small hospital, clinics, doctors' practices, all of those, right? And so Optum Health in the US owns and manages many thousands of hospitals and doctors. They're not called Optum, they're called by their own local name, hospital name. So that's the entity. So they actually provide healthcare services. In India, we don't do that, right, as Optum. So the other examples here could be Apollo, somebody else, anybody, any hospital or any even doctor's clinics is a provider, right? The second part of the Optum RX, Optum business is what's called Optum RX. Optum RX is pharmacy. So what does pharmacy business mean? One is in the US, pharmacy benefits are covered by insurance. In India, it's not like that. So they actually manage all the pharmacy requirements of patients, number one. Number two, they also manage delivery of medication for regular medication to patients. So for example, if you're if you're a diabetic or you're on cardio medication or whatever, you need monthly medication. So Optum RX manages all of that, sends it to you monthly, because out there you cannot go to the store and buy it like we can do here, right? So it's all covered by insurance. The third is Optum Insight. Optum Insight and the India arm is under Optum Insight. Optum Insight is actually think of it like a technology capability with products, systems, platforms, for example, electronic health records, all of the technology and the platforms required to run the healthcare system, right? Whether it's for hospitals, it's for pharma companies, it's for the government, and they're independent businesses, right? So they sell to each other sometimes mostly to outside customers. So what do we do in India? We're part of Optum in India. In India, we do three things. One is we do a lot of the work in terms of operations for Optum globally. We do a lot of the product and technology development for some of our products under Optum Insight. So we actually have a large technology team. And then we do a whole bunch of analytics and healthcare operations. For example, we manage some of the collections and so on for some of the hospitals. And we do a lot of that from here. Couple of other things that we do. We also provide what's called employee assistance counseling or employee well-being services, which is life coaching, which is done through companies, right? So for example, we provide these services to more than 200 companies in India, but it's business to business. It's not to the individual, right? So that's the India front-facing business that we do. And then we do work for the US healthcare business. That clear?
Good evening, ma'am. This is Kavita Gajendran, MD of Midland Cinemas. As a woman, what do you think is the biggest challenge we face as women entrepreneurs?
So few things, right? From my perspective, and I work with one or two women entrepreneurs who used to work with me, and I kind of mentor them. I think the first one is really about to be ready for the entrepreneurial journey, right? Because it's not an easy journey. I don't think we should underestimate it, right? It's a difficult journey. And it means it has a lot of bumps. So the ability to stay in the race, right? And stay in the race at scale. To say, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are small entrepreneurs. But sometimes women want to stay small and don't necessarily want to make it a bigger operation because they say, I don't think I can deal with this, right? So that ability to stay in the race and that ability to have confidence that you can actually do this, that's one, right? That's one of the challenges that I see that some women. The second is a systemic challenge. What do I mean by that? Sometimes, to the point I said earlier, banks will, now, there are a lot of opportunities for banks now to lend to women, but there are still, I would say, a lot of unconscious bias in the ecosystem about whether women can make a business successful. So there is also some proven research to say purely women entrepreneurs getting funding from VCs is very hard, very hard. The minute you go in front of a VC, they'll say, we don't think so, right? And this is not what I'm saying. This is, the numbers are there for you to see. So that ability to be able, the system support, right? Whether it's funding from VCs, whether it's funding from somebody else, the kind of support you get, people taking you seriously in this. I think those are, and some of the additional incentives that potentially a government can offer, or any other systemic requirement for the business can help with. I think there's lots more we can do. And then of course the third would be the biases that we anyway live with, right? So, and biases can also come from your own families, right? Your own groups, your own circles to say, you know what, this is too risky, right? Don't do this, too much risk. And you also hear about how, I go back to my earlier comment around difficult decisions, right? And being an entrepreneur, you have to take some difficult decisions, and it's a daily difficult decision. So I sometimes feel that while it's a myth, women have to learn to take difficult decisions and not feel bad about it. Right?
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Sahana. I'm a student of TSM. So it was actually a very inspiring story to hear from you. This is my second session to attend your.
You came in the morning?
Yes. Yes. So my very first question is. I have observed like you know where to stop and where to start. Our generation of facing an issue like where to stop. We actually doesn't know where to stop. Even say for example, if I wanted to read a book, I keep on read for 1 month. Even if I see a movie to inspire myself, I keep on seeing a movie. I don't know where to stop. Also, I'm an entrepreneur, so I keep looking into newses or something like that. I keep on doing it. I don't know where to stop and where to sail further. So can you please tell me where to stop?
I like your question, right? Because I sometimes see people stuck on their phones for 1 hour. I'm like, what are you doing? There's a better use of your time here, right? So I'll give you two perspectives. One is, there's no substitute for effort. You have to put your hard yards in. There's no such thing as luck. Luck will come when you have your effort done. But you need to know the difference between start with the end in mind. What is the outcome you want? Effort can't be just random. So even when you watch a movie, what do you really want? You've seen the movie, you're done. Why do you need more? Right? So what's the outcome? First, so look at the outcome and therefore calibrate your effort towards the outcome rather than without an objective. The reason why people go on doing something is because they're not clear about what they want to get out of it, right? So that's one, and I find it works for me. My husband tells me this a lot. He's saying, you're very good at this, right? Because he's a bit like you. He starts watching a movie, it'll go on till morning. So stop with the end in mind. Start with the end in mind, and once you do this, just stop, right? The second thing I would say is when you actually look at disciplined execution, right? Anybody can keep thinking, but at the end of the day, you got to get something done. The best leaders or the best entrepreneurs do things, and they do it consistently. They do it with a pattern. Right? So if you don't do that, then it doesn't matter how hard you work or how much time you do. If you start with the end in mind and say, okay, I've got enough and I've got to get this done. The last one I'd say is that 20%, and I've seen this again and again and again, you can solve a problem at 100% or you can solve a problem at 85%. The remaining 15% will take you 150% of the time and will not give you the results.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Visalakshi. We both are chartered accountants, and we are from Madurai, uh, third generation chartered accountants. We offer the same service, or at least the service offered by Big Fours, but we are not able to have that scaling presence as Big Four has. Where's that gap? Where are we struggling? Why is the place the constraint, or is there something else we are missing it out? Thank you.
So I don't know your business, so I will make a more slightly higher level comment. I think what is important in this day and age to be out there in terms of how you package your product and position your product and communicate your product, right? And understand what are the areas of ask. So, for example, if today if there's somebody who says startup business plans are important. See, traditional CA jobs have now morphed, right? There are add-ons on both sides. So if you can actually look at what products you offer, how you offer it, and then decide how to package it and communicate it, you might have some slightly different results. The second reason, why do people go to Big Four? I have a theory other than audit. Okay. Pure audit is fine, but they also do consulting. The reason people go to Big Four is because it is a seal of approval. Okay, if KPMG or EY or Deloitte or somebody has done it, okay, oh, Deloitte has told you this. I was saying the same thing, it's okay. But Deloitte has now told you this, it's worth a bit more. Fine, fair enough. So that credibility has happened for the Big Four over years, right? So it will take you time, but it's about repositioning who you are, how you are, what is the value you can bring. And secondly, if you have one or two marquee clients, as I call them, like bigger clients, ask them to do a little bit of work on your behalf.
Hello, ma'am. First of all, I congratulate for your work that you are doing. I'm Manohri from ETI, International Transformation Company. We are training students for communication skills as well as business training. And I wanted to know your daily habits that you follow that contribute to your success.
Okay.
I have two questions.
First
question. Second question will be, what is your state? If you are at a point, if you are at a breakdown state, how you will go to the breakthrough state? What you said you will be going for a mountainous region. That is optional. We have to get the time. Within the short time, how you will go from breakdown state to breakthrough state?
Sure. So daily habits for me fairly simple. I go back to the question she asked me about when do I stop, right? I'm very clear. I will, and this is something I learned. It's not as if I was born with this. I had a boss when I was in one of my banking jobs. I went up to get an approval from him at about 6:30. He was the head of the company. He was the CEO. I went to his office and his assistant was there. He had gone. So I asked his assistant, oh, he's left, is it? She looked at me and said, yeah, you know he leaves at 5:45 every day. So you have to come and get the approval if you want before that. So the next day when I met him, I said, you know, we came at 6 o'clock. Two of us went to get this. And I said, I wonder how you can leave every day at 5:45, but we are here till 8:30. So he looked at us and said, okay, you're clearly doing something wrong or you're doing somebody else's work. Right?
Okay.
So, and I went back and I said, okay, if this man who runs a really successful bank can leave every day at 5:45, there is something wrong I'm doing here. So what I decided to do, I do 2-3 things, right? One is I very clearly separate my work finish and my time. Okay. The second thing I do is I actually prioritize. What does that mean? There are some things only I can do. Yeah. There are some things I think I should do because somebody else can't do it as well as me. Mm-hmm. Right? And there are third things which I really don't have to do, but I just think it'll be nice if I do it. Right? So over a period of time, I have only stopped with the first, which is I will only do what I need to do. Right? Okay. And if somebody else has to do it, and there's a term in corporate called upward delegation. which means you don't want to take a decision, you send it up, your boss will have to approve or not approve. So any upward delegation goes right back. It's not my job, right? You guys have to do your job and then come to me when you're ready. If 3 of you can't agree and you're having a dispute, you sort it out among yourselves and then come to me. I'm not your... So the ability to prioritize what I really have to do. That's one thing I do in the day. So in the morning, I make sure that I get up, get into my assistant, do my mails, whatever, and say, okay, here are the 7 meetings I have. Here are the 3 that I don't need to attend. And I ruthlessly don't attend some meetings.
Super.
Right? Everybody thinks if you go to a meeting, you're important. I actually have the different problem. I don't want to go to most meetings unless I'm really required. Right? Any meetings, more than 6 people, I feel there's hardly any work that gets done there. Right? So I ruthlessly don't do meetings. The last is I'm very focused on outcome. Have we accomplished what we're supposed to get done? Is it happened? Right? I'm good with, and I actually support people, I coach them, but I don't do their work.
Good. And second question.
As we are running out of time,
Okay.
only one question.
Okay, thank
we can
you.
get it.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Archana, alumni of TSM. I have a question. At this current generation, the students coming out of college, they have been clearly spoon-fed about the leadership roles. So when they come out, right from the first day, they want to work as a leader. They're not ready to work as a soldier. They are not ready to take the ownership of the responsibilities given to them. So how to handle this situation?
It's a little bit of a stumped question, but I'll tell you what I think. Number one, most people who come out of MBA schools think they have to start at a particular level. I get it. And I'm not saying that's wrong. However, it doesn't matter which level you start. Unless you get your hands dirty, you do not know how to do a larger role. In my mind, there's a difference between being a leader, okay, and actually doing the job. What do I mean by that? You can be a leader even at the level that you're doing. You don't necessarily have to be a CEO or a COO or a CFO to be a leader. You can be a leader in the job that you're doing. You're a leader to your customers, you're a leader to your team, etc. My main thing to them is to say, you have to do the job at a level where you understand what this is. Leadership is not about, being a leadership role is not about just having a, I can direct people to do things. You can't even direct people unless you have worked there. And so if you look at any good leader, and they can start at leadership roles, but the message to them has to be a good leader and to do the leadership role well, you absolutely need to know the details, right? Like today somebody asked me, right, okay, you've moved to healthcare from banking. Am I an expert on healthcare? Answer is no. However, do I know enough about healthcare that the person who's doing it is the one? So when you start becoming more senior, you get more strategic, more conceptual. But when you are doing starting roles, or at least 2-3 levels when you start, you have to be a domain expert. Otherwise, there's no way you can even become a leader, because that ability to go up and go down is critical. I had a boss who told me, it is really important to be an eagle. What does the eagle do? The eagle actually soars really high. But when it sees that little worm, it dives straight in, picks it up and goes back. So a good leader will be able to do it at a strategic level, but will be able to come down and get into the detail where required. So I think they just, eventually if they don't understand this, then they will not be able to progress to their potential. I think that's the message really that I want to share.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the audience also for thought-provoking questions. Before closing, I would like to ask one question to you, ma'am. Considering your experience, leadership experience, like in different domains, how your business education helped one thing, and you are the right person to tell about like people those who are not having business education and they are doing they are taking up entrepreneurship. How important it is to take business education?
So, my view would be that some business education is very, very useful for being an entrepreneur. You don't necessarily have to be an MBA or a PGDM or a full-time course, but there are some basics that you need to know, right? One is, how do you manage your money? Most important. I can see a lot of people smiling. How do you manage your money? I mentor one or two people who, and I literally, I don't know what to do when I sometimes look at their balance sheet and I say, do you know what this means? Right? And that's the person heading the company, and I get really worried. Right? So, that's one. So the second thing that you need to do is to how to understand the driver economics of the business. What do I mean by that? Which is, what are your ratios of cost and inventory and selling and price in the market? How does all that, so how do you create a business plan that's real? How do you understand the many components of a business plan? The third really important piece is how to deal with people. In any business, you are dealing with people, right? I have an example at home. My daughter's an architect, very highly educated architect, right? She went to the US, she did her master's in Oxford, all of that. And for the last, she runs her own company. And there are times in the evening when she'll come and she'll say, oh my God, how do I manage this cash flow? So finally I told her, all right, you really need to do something that will help you understand how to manage your cash flow. So anyway, what she did, she went and online registered for the Harvard business courses, and she did what she had to do, some 2 or 3 things. So now she can at least understand her cash flow, right? So I would say it's really important, these 3 key areas, right? And the fourth one now is technology. There is enough material online, there is enough tutorials, there are enough courses that you can register for. The one big difference that has happened over the last several years is where training used to be fed to us, right? You used to have a course, today a lot of it is in our hands. If we choose to do it, which I go back to my comment on growth mindset, if we choose to learn, you can learn. There is always content available, and there are always experts that you can reach out to. So these are the 4 areas I'd say please spend some time and effort in.
Not only have you shared incredible leadership insights, but we also know your tea coffee preferences and your raves, yes, stress buster.
So she asked me, somebody asked me what I do, my daily stress buster, not my hikes, right? So one of the things I do is to make sure that I finish at the right time, and I have a routine for myself. I either do a yoga or I do a walk out, even if it's late at night. So just to clear my head. So that really helps. And I don't talk to anybody. And people ask me, how can you walk all on your own and you're not talking to anybody? Because everybody is chattering with each other. And I'm saying, I've spoken the whole day, I'm done. I just now need to keep quiet.
On a more serious note, this session has been an absolute masterclass in leadership. We have learned so much from your journey. I know everyone here is leaving inspired. Let us give a huge applause to Ms. Umaratnam.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really an insightful session for us. So we now arrive at a very special moment. In fact, something related to what ma'am was speaking right now. The official launch of Growth Mastery, the MSME program. So this initiative is designed to empower micro, small and medium enterprises with cutting edge strategies and industry insights to drive growth and success. So to give us a brief overview of this remarkable program, it is my honor to introduce Professor Ananthan. So Professor Ananthan, he's a PhD scholar in general management at Symbiosis University, Pune, specializes in strategy and entrepreneurship. He has published various journals, presented at international conferences, and attended faculty programs at IIMs, IITs, and ISB. So with that, let us warmly welcome Professor Ananthan to share his insights on this transformative program. So the stage is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm quite privileged to have her, and already most of the things have already spoken. So, keeping the times in mind, just briefing you a bit about the program. It is of a 3 months program where you would try to actually understand the challenges that MSMEs usually face, and don't worry about the challenges. We are here for you. We would help you to actually understand the challenges and then how to tackle those challenges, and then the next step is how to grow. So let's say you are at the level 1. How can you grow to the level 5? So how do you, first you have to survive that, whatever challenges you are facing, and after that, the growth starts. So this what we will be going to cover in this module, which is going to be of 3 months. We will try to cover each and every aspect of the business, be it finance, be it marketing, be it information system, be it your people, be it the culture, be it the structure. So we'll try, it is a holistic approach that we'll be bringing in this program, and we are not going to leave you after that program. We will still stick with you. There is also a mentorship option for this program. They will be continuing to mentor you whenever you are facing a challenge. We will have a platform where you can put your challenge, and then we will address it, and then that continuation will take place. We'll also have a networking so that you can also have connections with the others who are already doing the program, already done the program. So there will be an alumni network who will be also helping you out in your journey. So this is a brief about the program. So we'll see more about that in this brochure. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ananthan, for enlightening us on this remarkable initiative. Let us now get into the formal inauguration of this initiative and the wealth of opportunities it holds for aspiring and established entrepreneurs seated here. I now invite our chief guest, Ms. Umaratnam Krishnan, along with our esteemed dignitaries, to join us on stage for the Growth Mastery MSME program launch. With that, the Growth Mastery MSME program is officially launched. As we approach the conclusion of today's event, I now invite Dr. M. Selvalakshmi, Principal at Tyagaraja School of Management, to deliver the vote of thanks and express a heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made this event a success.
Thank you, Ms. Madhumita. Good evening. It is indeed my privilege to extend this vote of thanks. Today, we had the honor of hosting Ms. Umaratnam Krishnan and also launching our MDP for MSMEs, a significant step towards empowering businesses and leaders in Madurai. A sincere thanks to Ms. Umaratnam Krishnan for her invaluable insights and inspiring words. The interactive session was highly energizing. More to say, it was energizing and engaging, as she shared a lot of her real life experiences, real world experiences and practical insights, sparkling thought-provoking discussions among the participants. We deeply appreciate the presence of our esteemed business leaders and entrepreneurs who have taken their time out to be with us at this occasion. It means a lot to us to have you all with us in this journey. Your engagement made this event all the more success. Learning is an important lifelong activity, as we all might be aware. I would like to quote the words of our beloved former chairman, Sri Manikam Ramaswamy. Experience-based conclusions, not backed by sound theoretical knowledge or analysis, often mislead us, leading to wrong conclusions which are either related or seemingly real. These are the words which he had spelled out to us once. So this he had explained with an example. For years, based on our experience, we believed that the earth was the center of the solar system and all the planets were moving around that. So we believe experience is all about that. But then once when science and knowledge came into the light, then it proved us that it is all otherwise. So now we got to know how it all operates. So this journey that we have started through this program, Growth Mastery, which has been indigenously designed by TSM to support and empower the MSMEs, and it's been launched by the visionary leader, none other than Ms. Umaratnam Krishnan, is an endeavor for us to make this learning an enjoyable experience. It is our, approach to ensure that the joy in learning that we enjoy today is to be shared with all the fellow community. So that is where this program has been designed towards. Gratitude or due to our institution's leadership, including our beloved correspondent, our beloved chairman, and our esteemed director, our faculty and the organizing team for their unwavering support. A special thanks to TSM Entrepreneurship Cell and its members and team for backing this initiative completely. To our support staff and volunteers, your efforts behind the scene ensured a seamless experience. Let today be the start of impactful collaborations and growth of MSMEs in our region. Thank you all for being a part of this journey. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, Dr. Selvalakshmi, for your kind words. With this, we officially conclude today's event. We invite all our guests to join us for a high tea and continue engaging in insightful conversations over refreshments. The high tea has been arranged in the faculty mess, ground floor. So our student coordinators will be assisting you to the venue. Thank you.